Hey, James.
So he called over one of his coworkers to see if they could lift the bag together and realized it was just way too heavy.
Ugh, good grief, what's in that thing?
When Tony moves to open the duffel bag, he notices it's already partially unzipped.
He sees a plastic bag protruding somewhat from the open zipper, and he uses a stick to penetrate the bag, and in doing so, he sees a white sheet, what appears to be blue jeans and white socks, and immediately realizes something is wrong.
I think there's a body in here.
Tony makes a call to his supervisor.
Hey, I think we just found a body in a duffel bag.
Inside the duffel bag, police soon confirm what everyone else already fears.
Yes, it is a body.
They then assume a murder has been committed just based on the circumstances of how the body was found.
We know that it couldn't have been natural causes. It was in a plastic bag and in a suitcase.
But just where had the bag come from? And who was their victim?
They really don't have much to go on here in the very beginning.
This was scary because they had no idea how this person got here or who was responsible.
Was this connected to drugs? Was this a hit? Was this a prostitute who was murdered?
Police learn about the shocking disappearance of a New Jersey couple 30 miles away. It's the first of many vanishing acts in an investigation that will stretch for nearly 2 years. A story where what you see isn't always what you get.
He seemed to reinvent himself repeatedly. He just started all over again.
Born in Washington Heights, New York in 1971, Christy Neely grew up in a large and loving family.
Hey, Dad. Sweetie, how y'all doing?
She was one of 6 siblings. They were very close, tight-knit group that were supportive of each other.
From an early age,
It was infectious.
She was a very beautiful woman.
but everyone agreed Christy was much more than a pretty face.
She was smart, she was ambitious, she was hardworking, and she wanted to make something of her life. And one area that she was interested in was the law.
But in the fall of 1992, Christy's life took an unexpected turn.
Christy found out that she was pregnant. She was dating a guy named Antoine, and she decided to keep the child.
Christy loved her son, Jaden, and she was determined to make sure that he got the life he deserved. He was everything to Christy.
Still, as much as Christy had to make ends meet,
She worked in Manhattan as a telemarketer. She had to be on a certain schedule to get to work on time and deal with whatever it was that she was trying to do.
She came from a great family, but she was a proud woman, and most likely she did not want to ask her family for financial assistance. But New York City is one of the most expensive cities in the world, and sometimes you're just one bill away from being out on the streets.
At the same time, she started having relationship issues with Antoine, who was allegedly abusive. Finally, she said, enough is enough, and she moved out. So she ends up living in the women.
but she still remained optimistic.
Don't worry, baby. We're not gonna be here long.
Then, in 2002, Christy finally made good on that promise.
She was going to law school. She was looking after her child and making sure that he was moving forward in a positive direction. She herself was on an upward trajectory.
While Christy enjoyed being back in school, this vibrant young mother soon found something, or rather someone, who captivated her attention just as much as law school did. 40-year-old Sean Sutherland. From the moment Christy first laid eyes on Sean and her parents,
Took care of himself as far as his physical build, maybe 6'2", broad-chested.
Sean had apparently worked in a couple of law firms, and he also worked as a caddy at some of the most exclusive golf courses in New York and New Jersey.
Both her quest as well as his quest for education was indicative of this couple.
Think you might want to hang out and have a drink later on?
I think I like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I like that a lot.
The relationship blossomed over the next several months. The two were inseparable, and they were falling harder and harder for one another.
Sean.
Christy's spine. His growing bond with her son Jaden also made her heart sing.
Sean treated him like his son. He considered Sean to be his stepfather.
Want to see some hoops?
Oh, yeah. You think you could beat me?
Yeah, I know I can.
All right, let's go.
It was a great family environment.
And in 2005, Sean suggested they get a place together outside New York City.
I think Christy was a little hesitant to move out of the city and away from her family, but Sean convinced her that it was best for her and her son.
That summer, they moved less than an hour away to Bayonne, New Jersey.
It's a very...
Taking law classes, Sean soon landed a nice-paying gig at the best golf course in town.
He worked at the golf course, the Bayonne Country Club, as a caddy.
If you're a good caddy, you can make a lot of money, especially the club in Bayonne. Those are like senior executives in Fortune 500 corporations.
With a new home, added financial security, and a beautiful blended family, Christy and Sean looked primed to continue their upward path.
Everybody looked at them as the perfect couple. Both go-getters on the go, both success written on them.
But no one could imagine the horrifying chain of events that was about to... In early 2007, nothing seemed impossible for Bayonne, New Jersey residents Christy Neely and her boyfriend, Sean Sutherland.
In the eyes of the community, both Sean and Christy, quite a handsome couple, quite a great-looking family. They appeared to be what the American dream could be described as.
They had been together for the last 5 years. Both were happily employed, and they were providing a home for Christy's son, Jaden, which he deserved. Life seemed good.
While it seemed this upwardly mobile couple's fortunes were rising faster than the Manhattan skyline, a sickening in motion, a chain of events that will cast a dark cloud over their lives.
The area secure?
Yes, ma'am. We secured the area.
What do we got?
Well, the Department of Transportation worker had gone under the underpass there along the Henry Hudson Parkway and discovered this luggage, tried to remove that piece of luggage.
Judging by the odor, it had been there for a few days. The body had been twisted to fit inside of this suitcase. It was a really shocking find, even for seasoned detectives.
The victim appears to be a female, but at this point, that's all detectives know.
There was no identification on her. There was no purse, the shirt.
Denim shorts, Converse sneakers with no laces, and a black belt with silver rings on it.
While the woman's identity remains a mystery, her cause of death does not.
There was a lot of bruising and abrasions indicating struggle that went on. Ultimately, her neck had been compressed. She was strangled, and that's how she was killed.
This didn't happen easily, and it didn't happen quickly.
And judging by the scene, their victim didn't die here.
Circumstances being what they were, that it appears that it's a crime of a personal nature. Obviously, they were looking to conceal this body and discard it without anyone noticing it.
As for motive,
And is that how it came to be discarded by the side of the road?
That's something to look at. Who are the people surrounding her? What lifestyle did she lead? Is it something that she's doing in her daily routine that has put her in harm's way?
Or even worse, what if this is the work of a serial killer? Who knows if there could be additional bodies ending up in suitcases in New York?
While the Riverdale neighborhood is one of the nicer sections in the Bronx, maybe that also made it a perfect location to dump a body.
Perhaps the perpetrator might think there would have been less of a police presence. Therefore, it would have been easier to dump the body.
Seems there may be some truth to that theory.
Ma'am, do you remember seeing anything unusual going on out here in the last 2 or 3 days?
Oh, I'm sorry. I sure haven't.
No cars parked out along this road that you didn't recognize?
I didn't notice anything.
All right.
No one had seen anything, and the police didn't find any evidence in the surrounding area. So this was a total mystery.
If you don't have the person's prints on file, if you don't have any indication of who this person is or where this person lived, it could take years to determine who that person is.
Detectives!
Excuse me.
Then,
along with a bracelet, the victim was wearing a small pinky ring. It was a silver 2-stone turquoise ring.
it's not much, But maybe it's the traction this investigation so desperately needs.
Well, let's add that to the description and get it out to the media as soon as possible, all right?
Yes, ma'am.
Most people know what their friends or family may wear, if it's a ring or a bracelet or something. They had to get it out there. NYPD had to get it out to the public. And the public is really one of the best resources that we have in police work.
On jewelry.
The press immediately picks up the case, and multiple media outlets run the story on their evening news program.
As one might imagine, finding a body inside of a suitcase is not an everyday occurrence.
That evening, a New Jersey woman named Carol Cassay is just settling into bed when she decides to turn on her television set.
She was watching a clip about a woman's body that was discovered on the side of the Henry Hudson Parkway in the Bronx inside of a suitcase.
It's at that moment the news program shows the victim's composite sketch and her jewelry.
Oh my God. For her friend. No.
As Carol reaches for her phone, nothing could prepare her for what she's about to hear.
It was enough to break your heart. But the worst part about it was that there were 2 missing people.
An evening news report on April 9, 2007, about an unidentified murder victim discovered underneath a Bronx freeway has jolted New Jersey resident Carol Cassay into panic mode.
While Carol's watching this, she recognizes some of the jewelry as being rings that she herself had purchased for her friend Christy Neely.
Carol immediately calls Christy.
When she sees this, she reaches out to Christy's brother, Chris, and she lets Chris know that she had just seen this on the television, and she believes that the woman in the suitcase might possibly be Christy.
No.
Chris's response stuns Carol.
Carol, this is hard to say, but Christy's disappeared. Yeah, she's been missing for 4 days now.
What? Chris lets her know that, they're in the middle of filing this missing persons report for Christy.
As her friends and family hold out hope that the dead woman featured on the evening news isn't their beloved Christy, detectives
whether we thought that she had left home due to an argument, or was there actually something more going on?
One of the first people investigators want to talk to is the man who filed the missing persons report, Christy's brother, Chris Neely.
Hi, Chris.
Hey.
I'm Detective Diaz, and we brought you in just to ask you a few questions, okay?
Okay.
Can you tell me when you found out that Christy was missing?
According to Chris, everything he knows at this point comes from Christy's 14-year-old son, Jaden.
That morning, Chris apparently had gotten a panicked call from his parents. They were worried about Jaden.
Chris says he rushed to his sister's apartment, where he found his nephew seeing either his mother or Sean.
Why didn't you tell anyone your mom and Sean was missing so long?
I just thought they were coming back.
He always felt like she's going to come back, talking about his mother. And he thought Sean was going to come back too.
But after a few days, Chris says his nephew finally realized something was terribly wrong.
Jaden was out of food, he was alone, he was scared, and it was at that moment that he decided to call his grandparents.
Chris says after Jaden's call, he and his family had spent the afternoon trying to reach Christy and her boyfriend, Sean.
Called the cell phone and just kept going to voicemail.
To the residents to initiate a missing persons report.
Chris, along with the rest of the family, wound up spending hours with the police attempting to kind of figure out what was going on.
Chris claims police tried to reassure the family that Christy and Sean could still turn up.
Very rarely, and thankfully, do we have missing persons investigations that amount to something serious.
And have either Christy or Sean ever done anything like this before or disappeared without?
Never.
For investigators, the story of the couple's mysterious disappearance is deeply alarming. But there's one thing investigators must find out from the medical examiner's office before they proceed.
No, if the victim indeed was Christy.
On April 10th, Christy's father meets detectives at Jacoby Medical Center in the Bronx. Soon, the family's worst fears are confirmed. News of Christy's death hits the entire family hard.
He had the unfortunate experience of going to the morgue in New York and identifying his precious daughter.
But no one is more devastated than her son, Jaden.
He loved his mother so much, and her death caused this big empty void of loss, devastation, and sadness.
Loss. Police need to speak to him immediately.
I know this can't be easy for you, but we really want to catch the person who's responsible for your mother's death. So I just need you to take your time and tell me everything that you can remember, okay?
According to Jaden, 7 days earlier on the night of April 3rd, he, his mother, and Sean were at home.
Jaden said that he went to his room somewhere between 9:30, 10 o'clock. He played video games for a couple of hours, and then he went to bed.
I got up and I got ready for school the next morning.
Normally, his mother would wake him up and make his breakfast before he would go to school. That morning, he woke up and he didn't hear his mother or see her in the kitchen.
But he did seek to say goodbye to his mom.
But Jaden says Sean was the only one awake at that time.
Sean told him that his mother was sleeping in.
According to Jaden, when he returned from school that afternoon, his mother was still nowhere to be found.
Mom! He asked Sean, "Where is my mother?" And he said, "I don't know where she is." And it wasn't until later on that he had told her son that she went on vacation. She said she'll be back. I don't know where she went, and left it at that.
His mother's not there.
He couldn't put his finger on it, but in the back of his mind, he knew something was wrong.
Jaden tells police that later that evening, Sean gave him some money for takeout and told him that he...
Were you aware of any problems between your mom and Sean?
They definitely argue.
Christy's son had described him as being angry and upset and agitated often. No one we spoke to could describe the relationship between them as being physical in nature, but there was a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of arguing.
And what about on April 3rd, that last night that you saw your mom? Did you hear them arguing at all?
No, I didn't.
He couldn't hear any struggle going on.
To investigators, it seems suspicious that Sean left so suddenly and that he had been so evasive to Jaden about his mother's whereabouts, but one that will change the entire course of the investigation.
The police get an anonymous phone call out of the blue, and this could be a game changer.
On April 7th, 2007, Christy Neely's body was found stuffed in a duffel bag underneath a Bronx overpass. Now, less than 48 hours after Christy's body was identified, investigators are looking for her missing boyfriend, Sean Sutherland, after an eye-opening conversation with Christy's son, Jaden.
They fought.
Could one of these fights between Christy and Sean have turned deadly? To detectives, it seems unlikely given Jaden's statement about the night of her disappearance.
Did you hear them arguing at all?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
It seems odd that Sean would vanish into thin air. But at the same time, if a confrontation had occurred, you would think somebody would have heard it. And Jaden's room was right next door.
While the questions continue to mount, on April 18th, 2007, police receive a shocking call.
So a woman called claiming that she had information about...
It's about Jaden's father and Christy's ex-boyfriend, Antoine.
This unidentified caller alleges that Antoine assaulted Christy and had assaulted her in the past. And that's one reason why Christy was living in a shelter for a period of time.
If this was the father of Christy's child, it's possible Antoine still had contact with Christy. Maybe Antoine was jealous of Sean and Christy's relationship. Maybe Antoine did something to her, and Sean found out about it and went after him.
In light of Christy's violent injuries, detectives know this theory isn't out of the question.
Strangulation for somebody to take their hands and actually choke the life out of some individual.
That evening, detectives sit down with Antoine and ask him about his relationship with his ex.
Listen, Antoine, we got a call about you. This person claimed that you physically assaulted Christy before. Now she's dead. You know anything about this?
Hey, look, we had some arguments before, but that was a long time ago.
He was adamant that this was all a thing of the past.
How did you feel about Christy and Sean's relationship? That can be hard.
With our life, and I did the same thing.
Antoine's story never wavers, and it seems like he's telling them the truth, so they decide to let him go.
Great. We appreciate you coming in today.
You eliminate all the options, one by one. And in this circumstance, they probably eliminated every other option except for Sean.
When police question Christy's friends and family, the picture that emerges is in stark contrast to the one she and Sean portrayed to the outside world.
Christy's family members described him as having a dark side and being a jealous person.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Who's that on that phone?
Just an insecure man and sought to keep a certain reign on Christy.
You were just so insecure.
Insecure? Who you calling insecure?
You.
No one we spoke to could describe the relationship between them as being physical or abusive in nature.
Within the state of New Jersey, domestic violence does not just mean physical contact.
It can be emotional, it can be psychological.
It starts to chip away at your self-esteem, and then you begin to think that it's your fault, and maybe you're doing something wrong.
Family members say from the beginning, it seems Sean had completely sunk his hooks into...
Will any interference from Christy's support system?
Okay, just tone down before you wake my son.
Tell me to tone down?
This information definitely raises a red flag. And if the family members are to be believed, police could easily start to wonder if one man's quest for control could graduate to violence.
What if Christy started to fight back a little? What if Sean felt like he wasn't in charge anymore?
Obviously, there was some suspicion that Sean had something to do with it.
But was Sean really capable of murdering the woman he loved? A 1 in a million discovery is about to answer that question and send police...
I just think the randomness of that all working together in one day is just very odd.
While police in Bayonne, New Jersey are investigating the murder of 36-year-old Christy Neely, they uncover a dark secret about her relationship with boyfriend Sean Sutherland.
Sean was described as controlling and jealous. And that, coupled with the fact that he disappeared one day after Christy vanished, led investigators to believe that maybe this was their guy.
As the search for Sean continues, Bayonne investigator Nikki Diaz and her partner Keith Strifolino's body.
It was one of those expandable duffel bags with zippers. We were able to see the brand name, which was G&S. We decided to go check the local shopping district, which was not far from Christy's residence. It was a shot in the dark. We had checked 4 stores and came up with nothing.
Okay, this is the last one, all right?
As the 2 detectives enter the final store on their list, something immediately catches their attention.
We saw 2 bags that appeared to be identical to the bag that Christy's body had been found in, right down to the brand name G&S.
Yes, ma'am.
We immediately found the store owner. It was very likely that his store manager would remember.
Though there's no surveillance footage to back her up, the clerk's memory of the individual who made the purchase is crystal clear.
African-American, like 40s, early 50s. He had come in a couple times.
He came in and bought 1 suitcase. He came back a few hours later and stated there was too small, and he bought a similar suitcase and left again.
Do you still have that bag that he returned?
Yes, ma'am, I do. It's in the back.
But before taking the suitcase to the crime lab for testing, detectives present a photo array to the store manager.
Do you recognize any of these?
There's photo lineup, and
The individual that worked in the store was able to identify Sean Sutherland positively as the individual that purchased that piece of luggage.
While it's a stunning turn for the investigation, the test results on Sean's returned luggage are even more mind-blowing.
Christy's DNA was found inside that bag.
You can only surmise or conclude reasonably he tried to stuff her in that and she didn't fit, so he went and got a larger piece of luggage.
As for Sean's possible location, family members tell investigators he may be holed up with a cousin in Long Island, New York. That night, they move in to make an arrest.
This is a guy who is accused of murder.
Then, the only person at home is Sean's cousin.
Sean, let me see your hands. Let me see your hands, Sean. Hey, get out of the ground! I'm not Sean, man. He's not here.
It was a dead end.
In the weeks that follow, further frustration mounts.
He never went back to work. He didn't use his phone, didn't contact anyone. No one knew where he was.
They're just gonna find him. Literally, he fell off the face of the earth to them.
1 year passes, and there's still no sign of Sean Sutherland.
It was just so frustrating to Christy's.
Then, a year and a half after Christy's murder, a tip comes in from a man who lived just down the street from Christy and Sean in Bayonne, New Jersey. But the man's not in Bayonne now. He's at a golf course in a small town in suburban Philadelphia.
Yes, I'm at the Philadelphia Cricket Club. I just finished playing a round. My caddy said his name was Keith Davis. I swear he's the one in that murder investigation.
What? Slow down, slow down.
He went to the first tee. He was introduced to Keith Davis as his caddy, and he said he was just floored, like, oh my God, I know this is the guy.
I remember on the news watching the details. I swear it's Sean Sutherland.
Investigators that afternoon, Detective Cubbin and his sergeant head to the club.
I get there with my sergeant. We talk to Keith Davis, and I tell Keith why we're there. I said, New York has contacted us, and they think you might be a person of interest. I go, are you Sean Sutherland? And he acts like he has no idea what I'm talking about. He goes, I'm Keith Davis.
Sean Sutherland? No, man, I'm Keith Davis, man.
He was calm and cool. No change of demeanor there. The whole time, I'm not convinced it was Sean. I think it might just be a mix-up of, looks like a certain guy.
But just to be certain, detectives ask to see the man's ID.
No, man, my ID's up in the clubhouse.
I said, oh, it looks like you have a wallet in your pocket. And it shakes his head. It basically says, I knew this day was coming.
Put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest.
News of Sean's arrest quickly reaches investigators back in New York and New Jersey.
He was discovered on a golf course in another state in Pennsylvania by a person from Bayonne who happened to recognize him. It was like this was meant to be.
But with Sean now in custody, there's still one act that had yet to unfold. His trial. And when it comes time for his own defense, Sean has every intention of bringing down the house.
It's either yes or no. It's a yes or no question. Yo, man, you killed my mother in cold blood.
It's been nearly 5 years since Christy Neely's body was found stuffed in a suitcase underneath a Bronx freeway. Now, after a 1.5-year-long manhunt, the man believed to be responsible for her death, her boyfriend Sean Sutherland, is marched into a Hudson County, New Jersey courtroom to stand trial. But this will be a murder trial unlike any other.
Sean decides that he's going to represent himself.
He had a little bit of legal training, and he thought that was enough.
He had kind of like a smug look on his face. Like he was certain that he had this covered.
And in his case, that his first legal maneuver is a bold yet risky one.
Sutherland opted for a bench trial.
In a bench trial, the judge makes a determination. He's a trier of the law, and he's a trier of the fact.
Typically, in cases of this nature, all defendants elect for a jury trial. In so doing, you've got 12 jurors, and really all you need to do is convince one that there is some element of doubt.
But as far as Hudson County Prosecutor Tim Moriarty is concerned, there's no question who perpetrated this crime. In his opening statement, Moriarty described Sean as verbally abusive. 2007.
I've been played before. I don't have time for that.
Christy's son said that Christy and Sean fought every day.
Okay, just tone down.
He had psychological control over her. He would keep her isolated from family, from friends, not want her to go to work, not go out into the community and reach out to people. And in that sense, he gains more power and control over her.
It was not a good relationship.
she starts to see the real Sean, the ugly side. So there's the two faces. You have the good side, then you have the ugly side. And behind closed doors is the ugly side.
Prosecutor Moriarty asserts that on the night of April 3rd, 2000, it turned violent.
Ain't nothing wrong with me. You clearly have issues.
Something had happened between them, whether it be a fight where he hit her or, whatever it may be. Christy died from blunt force trauma and compression to her neck.
In layman's terms, he strangled her.
It's a very violent act. Someone has their hands around your neck, and you're fighting for your life. You're fighting to breathe.
I think that the most disturbing part of what happened to Christy Neely is that her son was in a bedroom close to where she was actually strangled, and for his life, for his future, which is such a lack of empathy and cold-heartedness.
Didn't hear any struggle going on in the apartment. He said he played video games and watched TV, but there was no sense that he heard the murder occur.
Authorities believe that the next morning after Jaden went to school, that Sean went to a nearby store and purchased a suitcase with the express purpose of stuffing Christy's body in it, driving 36 miles in a borrowed car to dump her body.
To support the state's case, Prosecutor Moriarty highlights the slew of circumstantial and physical evidence tying Sean
And the family that just didn't make sense. They did a forensic analysis on the first suitcase he bought and found Christy's DNA in the outer part of the trim. The store clerk was shown a photo array of possible suspects, and Sean Sutherland was picked out of that photo lineup.
It was a pretty overwhelming case.
And the most powerful testimony comes from Christy's own son, Jaden.
This is a young man who loved his mother. His testimony was both powerful and moving. He eloquently spoke to the tension that was present inside the home and how Sean prevented him from going into his mother's room,
as well as the reputation of his mother.
When you first met Mr. Sutherland, you were not living in a family shelter.
When we first met you, yeah, we was living in the shelter.
Did you have any problems in school? Objection.
For Jaden, having to be cross-examined by the very man he believes killed his mother is more than he can take.
Yo, man, you killed my mother in cold blood.
But Sean does much more than rile the state's witnesses. He attempts to point the finger at other potential suspects.
Whoever it was called as a concerned citizen and gave a report that basically establishes that anybody could have committed this crime against Ms. Neely.
Enough evidence against him for the necessary burden of proof.
Sean objected to everything he could, citing rules and statutes he really knew nothing about. It was all pretty ridiculous, but to the judge's credit, he was very patient.
There's an old adage that says that an attorney that represents himself has a fool for a client.
Finally, after 10 weeks of testimony, Judge Francis Schultz returns to his chambers to determine Sean's fate. On March 16, 2012, he returns with the verdict.
He was found guilty of a murder, and just knowing that he wasn't was, it was a lot of satisfaction.
Christy's family and her son Jaden had been through so much for so long, so they were happy that they finally got justice in this case.
Equally as important for the family is the fact that Sean Sutherland has finally been unmasked for the monster he is.
Sean, one of those people that's, the life of the party, and until you get to really know him, and then he's a controlling psychopath and makes life a living hell for you.
But it's too little too late for the loving mother who fell prey to this master of manipulation.
When he felt like he had the hold on you, and he could be gracious and charming, that's when the evil side came out. And unfortunately for Christy, she saw both sides.
Thursday, August 23rd, 2012. It's an early summer morning in a peaceful neighborhood just north of Columbia, South Carolina. But on this day, there's a buzz of excitement in the air.
It was the first day of school, so you had buses back on the road, you had kids walking to school, you had parents walking their kids to school, taking their kids to school.
At a home on the north side of town, a young mother named Kristen Brown is preparing to do just that.
Come on, get buckled up. Mommy's gonna be so late for work. Okay, Mom. Did you get your lunch?
Here's this woman, typical morning, getting ready to take her kid to school.
There's a body in the front yard. She was face down in the front yard.
Moments later, Kristen's frantic 911 call reaches area dispatchers.
I just found a dead female, black young female, right next door to my house. You just found what, ma'am? A dead, black young female in my neighbor's front yard.
She was in shock, and for a good reason.
It's crazy. Nice neighborhood. It's the first day of school. You know, excited about the school year, excited about doing new things, and someone leaves a body in the front yard of a home. It's crazy.
Even
Jesus.
5 days earlier, a 15-year-old girl named Gabby Swainson had disappeared just a few miles from this location. Her disappearance was all over the news, and police issued a massive manhunt. Kristen had every reason to believe that it was her.
We've got help on the way, ma'am, okay? Just try to stay calm and the help will be there soon. Jesus Christ.
But as authorities race to the scene, they know Gabby isn't the only young woman to have gone missing in Colombia during the past 24 hours.
The other young woman's name was Almanita Smith. She was a beautiful 26-year-old woman who was a staff sergeant in the U.S. Army and a master's student. Her family had reported her missing.
And how had she gotten there? The answer will tear a hole in a family's heart and bring investigators face to face with a monster.
In 21 years of law enforcement, that was absolutely the worst thing that I'd ever heard.
Born in Tuskegee, Alabama in 1986, it was clear there was always something special about Almanita Smith.
She was very outgoing, very bright, compassionate, very smart, had quick wit, and was pretty much a born leader.
Anything she put her mind to and her heart to it.
This doe-eyed beauty displayed a drive and maturity well beyond her years.
She was your typical teenager, but when it was time for her to take on life seriously, she took it on seriously, and she had goals. She had things that she wanted to do.
She was just stellar in school. I mean, that was just her thing. That was real big to her. She was on the basketball team. She was on the track team. She was a wavette or a dance squad for the band. She played tennis.
She actually won homecoming queen. She was turning into...
Believed it was her destiny to serve in the United States military. After high school, she enlisted in the Army.
She saw herself being an officer. She saw herself married. She saw herself one day with kids. But more than anything, she saw herself making sure her mom and her dad were taken care of.
True to form, in just a few short years, Almanita rose to the rank of staff sergeant while earning a college degree and serving 2 dangerous tours of duty in Iraq.
She was very driven, very motivated. It's like, what's the point of doing it if you can't be the best at doing it?
After Almanita returned from Iraq, she set A and began working on another master's in education.
She's a homeowner. By the age of 24, with 2 degrees, MBAs, that's very impressive for someone her age.
She wanted to retire out of the Army. She went to school for business. Once she finished with her military career, she wanted to open up her own little club/restaurant. She just wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Although Almanita dated and had boyfriends over the years, she mostly concentrated on her career and education.
She dated, but that was secondary. She spent most of her time working.
She ran into a ghost from her past. 27-year-old California native, Marcus Bailey.
Almanita Smith?
Marcus, hey.
Hey, how you doing?
I've been good. How are you?
She had met him during a tour in Iraq.
Here's this guy, Marcus Bailey, another veteran. Handsome, the guy looks great in his uniform, but moreover, he could relate to her. They had something in common, and that was serving in the U.S. Army
He told Almanita that he was still in the Army and that he was a drill sergeant stationed nearby at Fort Jackson.
So, any plans?
Well, I always had dreams of being a club DJ.
When she met him, you know, he was doing well.
Over the next few months, Almanita and Marcus did their best to stay in touch.
When they would go to parties, they would see each other and would talk, casual conversation. But she told me that they wanted to be in a relationship.
I think there was just a period where she met him and kind of moved fast.
Almanita has this nice home, 4 bedrooms. She's 24 years old. She's got everybody but somebody to share this with. He needed a place to stay. She was lonely. They were dating. It only made sense in her mind that, hey, why don't you come live with me?
While it seemed like Almanita's life was a fantasy come true, the summer he earned her master's degree in education from Columbia College.
She had just graduated with her master's degree, and the following week, she was supposed to go through an officer program.
It seemed like life was coming up roses for Almanita. That's why what happened next was so impossible to believe.
Her daddy and her mama was calling. The school had been calling, and that is when they realized something was wrong.
In the summer of 2012, Army reservist Almanita Smith was on the fast track to success in Columbia, South Carolina.
She had just graduated with her master's degree, the backing of her chain of command. They wanted to see her do great. They knew that she can do great. They just wanted to see exactly what the future held for her.
She was so driven. There are a lot of 25-year-olds that ain't doing nothing. And there are a lot of 40-year-olds that haven't completed or even remotely did half of what she had accomplished.
A string of accomplishments that Almanita happily shared with her love interest, Marcus Bailey.
She had reconnected with Marcus in the spring of 2012. They started dating, and he eventually moved into Almanita's home.
Everything was going great for her.
But that good life was about to take an unexpected and mysterious turn. It's for officer candidate school, but she never arrives.
Whatever she set forth, all her goals, she wanted to accomplish them. So if there was someplace she had to be on time, she was going to be there on time. Her classmates and the program was calling her, trying to find out where she was. It was unheard of.
Hey, Almanita, you weren't in class today, so I was seeing what was going on. Give me a call back.
That was completely unlike her. She was not gonna not go to school. She was a stickler for her responsibilities and what she needed to do. She would have not just not gone to school unless something had happened.
Almanita's classmates aren't the only ones concerned about her whereabouts.
Her dad, they couldn't get her.
It was extremely out of character for her not to be in contact with her parents. Like, I know she talked to her daddy every night, like every day.
By that afternoon, there was still no sign of Almanita. It's then that her father, Harold Davis, makes a decision.
I called Nita's mom, and I called Richland County Sheriff Department.
Ma'am, my name is Harold Davis. I'm calling from Tuskegee, Alabama. I have a daughter. My name is Almanita Smith. I haven't talked to her since Friday, and we normally talk every day or every other day. And I want to know if I can get someone to go by our home and check and see what's going on.
They sent a deputy out, goes to the house, knocks on the door. Marcus answers the door.
Hi, I'm Officer O'Donnell. We're here to do a welfare check at this address.
For who?
For an Almanita Smith. You mind if we come on in?
Of course.
Are you aware where she is?
Well, she was here early today, but she went shopping. I wasn't aware that she was missing.
He was at the home by himself. He said that Almanita had left earlier that day at about 11 o'clock and had gone shopping. He said that she received a phone call from someone. He didn't know who. He said she went into a dark-colored Toyota and left. He didn't see the driver didn't come.
Marcus says, well, she's still not back. Matter of fact, and putting it on the speaker, he tries to give her a call, doesn't answer the phone, then he even sends a text message, but yet no response.
Do you mind if we look around?
Yeah, of course.
She did a cursory search of the residence. There at that point, didn't appear to be anything out of the ordinary.
While Marcus is talking to them, he remains calm. talks to them in a normal tone, and officers being trained to spot signs of domestic violence or struggle. When they looked at Marcus, there were no signs. There were no cuts. There were no bruises, no scratches. So things appeared to be as normal.
But just what had happened to Amanita? As the hours tick by that evening, no one seems to have an answer.
I had called a couple of her friends, and they hadn't seen her.
At this point, nobody knows who this potential guy in this dark car is. Family doesn't know. Marcus doesn't know. We're just following a story down a rabbit hole.
She would have not gone away with someone without someone knowing. I mean, she would have called.
But for officers at the Richland County Sheriff's Department, there's further cause for concern.
At this same time, there was a missing teenager that had been missing in the neighborhood.
5 days earlier, a young girl named Gabby Swainson had disappeared. She was all over the news. This was a reoccurring story. Nobody knew where she was.
She had been missing for a while. We had believed that she had been kidnapped by someone that's close to the home.
They had organized searches, manhunts. You know, people were out trying to figure out, where was this young girl?
Is it possible these two disturbing disappearances are connected? At this point, no one knows for certain.
Amanita's friends and family were deeply concerned.
In 24 hours, a sickening discovery will close a chapter on one of these two missing person cases and open the door to a baffling murder investigation.
It was a shocker to me. I got a phone call from my sister, and it was awful.
That was the worst day of my life.
In less than a week, two young African-American women have gone missing in Columbia, South Carolina. The first person was a 15-year-old cheerleader named Gabby Swainson. Then, just 5 days after her disappearance, 26...
A small town atmosphere. You know, it's a very small town. You know, people know each other. People care for each other. That's one of the things that we're known for. And you have something like this happen, it scared the community.
It was a real sense of helplessness. I didn't know what to do.
Amanita's father, Harold, is less indecisive. On the night of August 22nd, 2012, he makes plans to drive up from his home in Alabama to search for his daughter.
I just felt something bad. I was going to leave. I started to leave that night, but I really wasn't prepared. So I was going to leave the next morning.
Harold and his family spend a restless evening in Alabama. But on August 23rd...
At 6:45 a.m. on August 23rd, a woman named Kristen Brown was leaving her home in North Columbia to take her daughter to school when she saw a body lying in her neighbor's yard.
Kristen's ensuing 911 call leaves little speculation as to the identity of the female victim.
Oh my God, this is a young girl. Hey, we're getting everyone on the way, all right? She's a sweet girl. Oh my God.
She thought maybe that was the missing person that we were looking for. You know, this was the missing teen.
Everybody thought it was Gabby Swainson.
That's the first thing that came to my head. We found her, you know, unfortunately.
Oh my God. But just before first responders arrive at the scene, a man races from the front door.
He comes outside, and his reaction immediately is he starts sobbing. He's emotional. She was face down in the front yard. He rolled her over and was able to recognize her.
The victim isn't Gabby Swainson as everyone fears, but Marcus's girlfriend, Amanita Smith.
She's laying face down. He goes out and throws a blanket over the body. He was having chest pains, having a reaction to seeing the corpse.
Stand on up, bud. Come with me.
He was having some kind of an attack. They took him to the hospital to get him evaluated.
With Amanita's grieving boyfriend now removed from the scene, investigators take their...
outside, and Amanita was in this state of decomposition.
The body was in a decomp state of excessive swelling, especially around the face. The tongue was swelled out of her mouth. Her limbs, you could tell, had an excessive amount of fluid in them, along with the abdomen area and the legs.
Everything starts to decompose at a different rate, but you can tell the process is in motion. Again, it's South Carolina in the summer. It was August. It's hot.
Any obvious sign of how she was killed?
But Amanita's state of decomposition presents investigators with a problem.
They couldn't get a definite cause of death. Probably...
Amanita's body ended up where it did. Could the mystery man she allegedly left her home with the day before have intentionally placed her here?
This is an odd case. This is a case that you don't normally see people that do this, unless you're Jeffrey Dahmer or somebody that has a very twisted personality.
It suggests some kind of message. Why would someone take her away and cause her harm and then bring her back and lay her in the front yard without there being some kind of significance to that?
While Amanita's body is transported to the Richland County Medical Examiner's office for an autopsy, news of her death has...
Like a tsunami, an earthquake. She touches so many people's lives. It's devastating.
I was called at 9 o'clock that morning and drove straight to her house. I mean, it was a surreal experience for me.
While those close to Amanita begin to converge at her home, Detective Martin heads to the hospital to have a chat with Marcus Bailey.
At that point, he said that he wanted to speak with us.
I know this is a very difficult time for you, but are you comfortable answering some questions right now?
Yes, sir, I'll try.
He said Amanita was a really good person. She had just graduated from college, and she was in the process of being selected for an officer's position in the Army.
While Marcus seems genuinely upset...
Again, he said he saw her on the 22nd at about 11:30, and he said that she had left with this mysterious person.
I didn't really get a good look at his face.
So you're in a relationship with Amanita together, yet you're okay with her going off with a strange man?
It's kind of complicated.
He said that they had an open relationship. Sometimes they would be together, sometimes they'd be with other people. And she was allowed to kind of do whatever she wanted to do.
She still allowed me to live there, as long as I paid the rent.
But it's what Marcus says next that's the most alarming detail to investigators.
He said, well, she was picking up men on Craigslist. Men were buying her things.
The obvious fear is that maybe Amanita will.
It's not unusual for people online to exaggerate the truth about themselves a bit, let alone be totally opposite of who they really are.
But had this beautiful Army veteran really waded into the dangerous waters of online dating? That answer and more was about to swamp this investigation, leaving detectives to sort out the carnage of ill-chosen love.
This isn't what you do to people you love. This isn't how you treat people you love.
On August 23, 2012, a family's worst nightmare comes to fruition. Her home.
She had a bright future. Anything she wanted to do, she could have done.
It sickens you because you think about the victim, and she had a very successful future. She had a very big future. She was doing so many things to make herself better, to prepare for her life.
It's a life that everyone agrees has ended far too soon, making detectives more determined than ever to catch Amanita's killer. But having just interviewed her boyfriend, Marcus Bailey, identifying this individual may not be easy.
Marcus said he and Amanita were in an open relationship and that she was meeting other people online. He said Amanita left the day before her death with a man he had never...
Questioning Amanita's friends and family for the first time. When investigators ask about Amanita's dating life, they find it difficult to believe that this straight-laced overachiever would have been so reckless.
She don't meet strangers. She don't meet people on dating sites, Facebook, Instagram, or any of those things. That's not who she was.
As for her relationship with Marcus, they say at first, Amanita had a hard time resisting the charms of her strapping soldier.
I think she met him, and he's one of those people where if that's your thing, he kind of looked right on paper.
But others say their first impression of Marcus left much to be desired.
Told her that. I thought he was a loser.
The way he dressed, the way he drank all the time, the way he interacted with her. I mean, he was just a thug. That's the bottom line. He was a thug.
But Amanita apparently saw something in Marcus that she liked, and she wasn't one to back down from a challenge.
She has a very good heart, very big heart. Maybe she could help him change. That is the impression that I got, that she could help him change.
For the first few months, friends say it seemed like their lives were on solid ground. But then Almanita learned the truth about Marcus's military record.
She found out about
And the truth of the matter, friends say, is that Marcus had been living a lie all along.
Marcus Bailey had been dishonorably discharged for fraternization, meaning that he was having relationships with the enlisted personnel that he was supposed to train.
He was sleeping with privates. When you're a drill sergeant, you are not supposed to have any type of sexual contact at all.
A fact Marcus failed to share with Almanita.
Last text she sent me about him, she said, I found out that he was not who he say he was.
He had let her believe that he was being demoted, but he had already been kicked out in the whole nine because, you know,
representing himself as if he was an active duty soldier.
He got kicked out. He didn't have anywhere to go. He couldn't find a job. He wasn't working or anything.
But besides misrepresenting his own work and military record, it turns out Marcus had another secret. And this one, friends say, was a doozy.
Who's this Janelle that keeps texting you?
Nobody.
Nobody. I don't believe you. Who is she?
Marcus was in fact married to a woman that lived in Colombia.
Your wife?
Although he was estranged from his wife, he had a young son, and she was pregnant with their second child.
When were you going to tell me that?
It's over with.
It's over with.
Yes.
She started to see him part of her life.
Come on, baby.
Don't baby me. We're done. You can pack your stuff and you can go.
When she finally found out, she wanted him to move out.
Where am I go, huh?
But she felt bad because he didn't have a place to go. So she just let him stay there and move into the other room until he was able to get on his feet.
She was trying to help him.
As for the contention that Almanita and Marcus might have had an open relationship, her family doesn't buy it.
Never. Never. So either she was with you or she was without you.
To investigators, Marcus sounds like a cancer in Almanita's life. But that still didn't mean they're forth. Detectives receive Almanita's autopsy report.
4 to 7 days.
Her body had been dead for days. She had been in that state of decomposition. It just wasn't possible that she was alive and well and walking the day before at noon. The lack of the insects being on her suggests that she wasn't outside. It looks more like she was stored in a house.
But as another piece of this investigation falls into place, there's a far darker chapter of this story that's yet to be told. One so terrible, it's unforgettable.
It's like looking at the devil, like soulless, like there was nothing there.
Smith died at least 3 days before her body was discovered in the front yard of her Columbia, South Carolina home. A fact that seems to contradict Almanita's on-again, off-again boyfriend, Marcus Bailey's statement to police.
He said he saw her on the 22nd at about 11:30, and she was getting dressed up and leaving the house in this mysterious car. The position of the body and where the fluid was inconsistent with what he was saying.
But phone records offer investigators another insight into Almanita's love life.
We tried to follow up with, well, who would this person be, this mysterious phone call? Well, there wasn't a phone call there that came in.
In fact, what Almanita's phone records do show is that her...
Get in contact with you. I hope everything's okay. Yeah, but you need to call me back. 2 days. This is ridiculous. If you're going to go on a disciplinary act, you need to let everybody know.
Yeah, you need to call somebody and let somebody know something, baby. Anybody heard from me, everybody's calling around. You let somebody know if you're all right.
And we believe that she was last seen on the 16th, late hours of the 16th.
But just what transpired between the time Almanita had disappeared and the time her body was found on August 23rd? To unravel that mystery, detectives pull Almanita's bank and credit card records.
So we've got charges on her card during the time the autopsy report says it.
When police review the security cam footage, it's not Almanita they see on a 6-day shopping spree.
On video, we have images of Marcus using the credit cards.
There were clothing receipts where he had gone and made some purchases with her credit card. I believe there was a couple other receipts there. There were ATM receipts.
Then on August 19th, Marcus's 27th birthday, he really dropped some cash.
He went to a nightclub. When he started spending money at this nightclub, the bill was close to $500.
He had a birthday party
For himself. Brought out sections in the club and brought out bottles and was just buying
They
bottles.
go into a nightclub and they spend another large sum of money, and he takes everybody out to breakfast.
And this was during the period that her father couldn't get a hold of her.
In light of their growing suspicion, detectives decide to execute a search of Amanita's home. Almost immediately, they notice something very odd.
There was a lot of air fresheners. A lot of air fresheners in there.
You're almost smacked in the face with this air freshener. There was just so many different smells and coverings going on in this room. They were competition. It was not so much nauseating, but it was just overwhelming when you first walked in the door.
But underneath all that industrial aroma is a smell seasoned investigators are all too familiar with.
There's no mistaking it. You smell it once, you'll know again 20 years down the road. When you smell it, you'll know. You can't mask it.
When I opened up the dryer, there was a blanket, just like the one that had been placed over her body by Marcus Bailey. And the smell of decomp coming off of that was excessive.
I think we'd call them the cadaver dogs.
I think you're right.
This is a dog that looks for decaying flesh and human flesh. It doesn't look for anything else other than that.
As the dog makes its way around the home, its well-trained nose soon locks in on two specific rooms. Amanita's master bedroom.
Parts of the house saying that a body had been stored there.
If the dog could talk, it would have definitely said, this has been here for a while.
Investigators suspect the transporting of the body caused the pungent odor to waft through the house, which explains why officers didn't smell the stench during their initial cursory search. When investigators searched the garage, it appears that Marcus had been preparing to make a fast getaway.
His clothing was all in bags next to the car in the garage. Inside the car were her credit cards, her military ID, and other things.
While officers continue their search of the premises, they know one burning mystery is finally over.
The evidence from this is the one that killed her.
That afternoon, police arrest 27-year-old Marcus Bailey for the death of his former lover, Amanita Smith.
He was arrested at the hospital. I was mad. I was really mad.
I don't think this is domestic violence, and that's something that I've kind of been on the fence about since this happened. This was just murder, flat out, cold-blooded murder.
While family and friends try to come to grips with the chilling truth, the full spectrum of Marcus's betrayal would soon be illuminated and would shine a light on pure evil.
The dude just had to be nuts. Couldn't be no other explanation. The fact that he picked up a woman and brought her back to her home was the part that was sickening.
July 23, 2013, 27-year-old Marcus Bailey's murder trial gets underway inside a Columbia, South Carolina courtroom. Marcus stands accused of killing his on-again, off-again girlfriend, Army reservist Amanita Smith, in August of 2012. A crime that sickens the entire community.
I never would have thought I would be burying my baby. To know that someone, this young man, Marcus
Bailey, anything she wanted to do, she could have done. And he took that.
Prosecutors say Amanita's murder was one final betrayal in a rocky romance rife with lies and false promises.
Marcus wasn't in the military as he led Amanita to believe. In fact, he was dishonorably discharged and wasn't working. And he was still married to another woman with a baby on the way. In a nutshell, Marcus wasn't the man Amanita thought he was.
Here we have two different people. You've got Amanita, whose military career is growing. She's getting commissioned as an officer in the Army. She just finished college. She owned her own home. She owned her own car. She was being successful and had a mission and a dream.
Probably telling her to let Marcus go. It was her heart, prosecutors say, that enabled Marcus to remain in her home.
He didn't have anywhere to go. He didn't have any money. He didn't have a job, couldn't get a job. She was just helping him to get back on his feet.
I believe Amanita had drawn a line in the sand. You're gonna mow the yard. You're living here for free. You're gonna do this.
Prosecutors believe Marcus balked at Amanita's demands sometime on the night of August 16, 2012.
They had guests that evening who came over on the 16th.
So, when are you gonna mow the lawn?
I told you I'd get to that.
Get to it when?
And Marcus is saying that he wasn't
about him not doing his share around there and so forth. I believe that he probably murdered her that night. Probably after the friend left, they had an argument, and that's when it occurred.
I'm sick and tired of you always complaining all the damn time. You always damn complaining about every single thing.
We'll never know if it was just an argument that escalated or if he planned to kill her that night. And that we won't know because we weren't in the room, and I can't ask Almanita.
Do not. Yo!
Get off of me!
I said, what? Shut up!
She's not breathing. You didn't call 911.
He didn't have her nagging at him anymore. He was able to do what he wanted to, and he did. He went and partied all week, and he spent all her money.
I just think it was insane. It further cemented to me what his motive was. Like, you just wanted her money.
But prosecutors say the depths of Marcus's betrayal were truly sickening.
When he goes out and parties with the nightclub, he's picked up some random girl and had sex in Almanita's car. And then he goes and he picks up the clerk at the clothing store, and he takes her back and has sex with her in Almanita's home. We were able to validate that. She did have sex at that time, but she became suspicious a little bit about him because he wouldn't let her go upstairs.
Sexual relations with another female in the house when the body was upstairs.
In 21 years of law enforcement, that was absolutely the worst story and the worst thing that I'd ever heard. Being there, animal, sure, sheer animal.
This twisted trip finally came to an end on August 22nd.
The father had called him on the 22nd, had called 911, and then I think the rush kicked in that it was time to place the body out front.
A theory prosecutors assert that's bolstered by the trove of evidence that police recovered.
Positive hits by the police cadaver dog inside the home and on the blanket recovered inside the dryer. The evidence that Almanita died inside the house and was stored there for multiple days was overwhelming.
But despite what looks like an impossible case, Marcus's defense attorney does what he can under the circumstances.
It was the defense's idea that, yeah, I did do a lot of bad things. I may have cheated on this person. I may have used this woman's credit cards. I may have brought other women into the house, but that doesn't mean I killed her.
They wanted to attack the cadaver dog, and they wanted to attack the science, and they wanted to attack the neighbors and the witnesses and the cause Marcus all his grief.
Finally, on July 31st, 2013, the case goes to the jury. 3 hours later, they return with a verdict: guilty.
Marcus Bailey was sentenced to 50 years in prison.
50 years sounds like there's a hope that you might get out. You know, it just feels like there's hope that you might live to get out, and I don't want him to live to get out. I want him to die in prison.
He's a sociopath, calculated, cold-blooded killer is what he is. I hope he rots in jail. I really do.
For Almanita's friends and of a wolf hiding in sheep's clothing.
Was it worth it? Was it worth taking her life? You know, was the outcome worth you taking somebody so rare, so special, you know, from this earth?
He didn't just take anybody. He took somebody that was special. She was an asset to everybody she touched, and that's who he took.
When you look at me, you don't see me. You see God's grace and mercy. That sustains me every day. There are times I feel like I just want to be okay.
But in the wake of this tragedy, while Almanita's family was still healing, the residents of Columbia, South Carolina were forced to weather another tough blow.
A boyfriend of Gabby Swainson's mother, the teenager that disappeared the same week that Almanita did, ultimately confessed to killing Gabby and was sentenced to 30 years in prison.
There was no connection between Gabby Swinson's case and Almanita's case, but the good news is both families got justice in the end.
Monday, July 18th, 2005, West Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's 6 p.m., and workers at a local daycare are waiting on one last parent, pregnant 24-year-old Latoya Figueroa, to pick up her daughter, Aisha.
Hi, Latoya. It's Shelly from Aisha's daycare. I was just calling to make sure that you're still going to come pick her up today.
She didn't pick up her daughter that night for daycare. Even at 6 months pregnant, just leaving her. No way. There's no way. It's not even in her physical being to be
Picked up yet today, and I can't get in touch with her mother. Do you think there's any way that you'd be able to come pick her up?
If she couldn't pick her daughter up, she would have made arrangements for someone else to pick her up.
Fortunately, her father was an emergency contact, so they contacted the father, and he picked his daughter up. He was really concerned.
Toya, why didn't you show up? Aisha can spend the night with me, but give me a call when you can.
Hours later, Antoine still hasn't heard from Latoya. She's also a no-show at the apartment she shares with her uncle.
It's so not in her character. It's so...
Desperately to reach her, but their calls go unanswered. So they start reaching out to her closest friends, including Latoya's current boyfriend, Stephen Poche.
Hello? She was 5 or 6 months pregnant, and he was the father.
I was calling to see if you'd heard from Latoya over the last few days.
I seen her yesterday. We went to a doctor's appointment. What's up?
She didn't come home, and she didn't pick up Aisha from daycare yesterday, and that's just not like her.
What? Tell me what's going on.
Stephen was extremely concerned about not only her welfare and well-being, but the well-being of this
There's with no sign of her. On July 21st, her family files a missing persons report with the Philadelphia Police Department.
Latoya's family let the authorities know right away. This is unlike Latoya. So they really believe that something's wrong.
People were thinking, what could have happened to Latoya? Was she in a hospital somewhere and no one could identify her? Did someone snatch her? And was she still alive? It's a huge mystery.
A mystery that was about to become a rallying cry for a city. One rippling with unspeakable deceit and tangled lies that all culminates in a heart-stopping showdown. Born and raised in West Philadelphia, Latoya Figueroa was a little girl with a big heart.
Latoya would give her shirt off her back for the next person to help them out. Would truly look out for a person without even knowing them.
She was a hard worker. She had a dream of being a nurse.
She put herself on a path to succeed, and she was determined that she wasn't going to let anything stop her.
By the time Latoya reached high school, she had blossomed into a bright and beautiful young woman.
She's like 4'11", maybe 115 pounds, soaking wet. Just little and petite. A beautiful person, inside, out.
When she was just 16, Latoya fell head on.
Latoya, when they first got together, they were very young. They loved each other. They really, really did.
A year later, Latoya became pregnant. Thrilled to become a mother, she and Antoine named their baby girl Aisha.
She was very responsible, very good caretaker, very interested in loving and nurturing her daughter. An involved parent.
She loved being a mom, and she was a great mom.
The love for their child wasn't enough to keep Latoya and Antoine together as a couple. After graduating high school in 1999, the two parted ways.
I believe it was a good relationship. I think that they
to make sacrifices, and that meant putting her dreams of nursing school on hold.
She had 3 jobs, and one was a hostess. She worked at a marketing research firm. I mean, so driven, so determined to make sure that her daughter wanted for nothing.
As much as Latoya adored her daughter, at 23, the young woman with a shining smile and killer figure still craved something else.
She wanted to love again. She wanted to share her life with somebody.
As fate would have it, one day in late 2004, she unexpectedly bumped into an old friend.
Toya?
Steven? Really friendly and sweet.
Look at you. You look good.
You look good yourself, though.
You think?
Trust me, I know.
Toya was pretty, so I think he was attracted to her. Now, her being attracted to him, I can honestly say he's one of the few good guys.
So you should definitely hit me up.
I'd love that. What's your number?
They started off as friends, very good friends. They were both funny, goofy, laid-back type of people.
It wasn't long before the pair's friendship blossomed into something more.
Somewhere along the line, it became an intimate situation, whereas though they went from friends to lovers.
This is good.
Took our door open, buys the flowers, stuff like that.
For LaToya, being with Steven was just easy. Steven was great with Aisha, and that meant the world to LaToya.
A fact that soon became even more important after LaToya broke some news to Steven.
I'm pregnant.
Really?
Yeah.
That February, a few months later, after they reconnected, LaToya found out that she was pregnant.
She was ecstatic. She was totally overjoyed.
Steven was a little shocked when he found out that Toya was pregnant, but he was happy about it. He named the baby and everything.
With Steven's love and support, LaToya
and a man in her life who loved her. Life was good, and it seemed like it was only going to get better.
But on July 18th, 2005, the life Steven and LaToya were building together comes crashing down. That day, LaToya Figueroa disappears without a trace.
She's literally vanished.
Someone who typically stays connected to their family to go missing and just vanish, that's a huge red flag that something has gone wrong.
So many ways. Already the proud mother of a 7-year-old daughter, LaToya was now 5 months pregnant with a second child. All thanks to a rekindled relationship with high school friend turned lover, Steven Poche.
They were friends first, and when they became lovers, I was just like, who really doesn't want to fall in love with a friend?
But on Monday, July 18th, after a routine prenatal visit, LaToya failed to pick up her daughter at daycare, triggering alarm bells for her family and friends.
They were hoping for the best, but also thinking of the worst, trying to put whatever clues they had could have happened.
Now, 48 hours after LaToya's disappearance, her friends and family are doing everything they can to find her.
They were placing pamphlets and brochures and pictures of her all around the city of Philadelphia.
Meanwhile, Philadelphia police are ramping up their search efforts as well. They've started by looking at one of the people closest to LaToya.
When you have a case like LaToya's, it was a natural instinct for the police officers to turn to Steven Poche because he was the last person that was known to be with her.
When was the last time you saw LaToya?
The last time I saw LaToya was July 18th.
Steven Poche says that they went to a doctor's appointment, they went to get something to eat, they went to his apartment, she left, and he didn't see her again after that.
How was she feeling? Was everything okay?
Everything was fine. I mean, she wanted to go shopping for the baby, so I went to the bank and got out $300.
What time did she leave the house here?
5 o'clock. She had to go pick up Aisha from daycare, yeah.
Emotionally, Steven was a wreck for multiple reasons because, one, she was pregnant with his child. No one knew where she was at.
Steven appears genuinely concerned, and when detectives follow up on his story, it checks out.
Steven's bank records show a withdrawal PM near Steven's apartment.
Steven agreed to let the police department search his home. There was no DNA, no hair, no blood, nothing to indicate that any foul play had happened at the house.
But before detectives leave, Steven drops a bombshell. One that suggests his relationship with LaToya wasn't as seamless as it appeared.
He brings in the possibility of her having other relationships with other men.
He mentions that there's a person that's giving her flowers. He mentions that there's a person that works at the Friday's restaurant. Then he also mentions the fact that she has this previous boyfriend who she has a child with.
Claims LaToya might well have had beef with her ex, daughter Aisha's father, Antoine Jenkins.
He mentioned to police that Antoine was spending more time with his new wife and her kids versus spending time with, her daughter, and LaToya had a real problem with that.
Just for some of the things Toya said herself, like she would have these fiery arguments with the father of her kid. And it was a time where he did like struck her.
If the allegations are true, detectives know they need to find Antoine immediately.
It doesn't take them long to find Antoine because he was with LaToya's family, putting up flyers, talking to neighbors, seemingly doing everything in his power to help try to find her.
Investigators begin by asking Antoine about his relationship with LaToya.
We know y'all have had some problems in the past and that they might have been about your daughter. Is that true?
Yes. LaToya, she's an amazing mom. She always wanted what was best for our daughter. Sure, we had the occasional fights, but it was never serious.
Because of his sincerity, the police officers kind of ruled him out. He seems to be sincerely concerned about her welfare.
After hitting another dead end, frustrated detectives are finding few leads.
Police officers weren't able to find any activity.
Toya's family refuses to give up hope.
Her father, Melvin Figueroa, a trooper. I mean, this gentleman would not let the story die. He began to pester the media. He pestered the police. He pestered everybody until the story was told.
I got to stick by my daughter's side. I can't turn my back on her.
To help drum up publicity, Melvin Figueroa calls in the help of a prominent local relative, his cousin, Philadelphia City Councilman Juan Ramos.
The city, particularly our police department, is doing everything that they can.
Ramos sets up a hotline, establishes a reward, and helps turn the search for LaToya into a city.
It's supposed to be the city of brotherly love. You know, if there's love out there, just please share it with us. That's all I have to say right now.
The publicity pays off, and the city bonds with one common goal: to find LaToya Figueroa.
Everyone's on board, the family's searching, the city gives supports. Everyone is doing everything they can to help find LaToya.
Dozens more leads pour in, but unfortunately, none yield any credible evidence as to LaToya's whereabouts. Then on August 16th, a police team makes a shocking discovery in the Brewery Town section of Philadelphia.
Body of an African-American woman.
You're still hoping for the best, but in your inside, you're like, there's just no way. Your hopes is starting to be overshadowed by the doubts and, you know, your fears. She may not be coming back.
It's been nearly a month since 24-year-old single mother LaToya Figueroa vanished from the streets of Philadelphia. 5 months pregnant with her second child, LaToya's plight has gripped the community and left her loved ones devastated.
Very disturbing, very like a limbo type feeling. You really don't know how to feel, you know.
Supposed female corpse 5 miles from the West Philly street where LaToya was last spotted, causing the hopes of the community to plummet.
Everyone was terrified this could be LaToya. As soon as the family heard about the discovery, they rushed to the scene.
After securing the crime scene perimeter, investigators take a look at their victim.
All right, how long do you think it'll take to get an autopsy going?
About 24 to 48 hours.
24, 48 hours.
When the official report reaches investigators, the findings are conclusive.
It was not LaToya because of the physical characteristics of this woman.
Their Jane Doe had short hair, whereas LaToya's hair.
Although LaToya's friends and family breathe a sigh of relief when they hear the news, the fact remains. Police are still no closer to finding LaToya.
There's also some frustration in this case because there are really not a lot of physical clues. She just vanished.
She didn't seem to have any enemies, and there was no reason anyone would want to hurt her.
That is, until detectives come across a police report filed on April 28, 2005, 3 months prior to her disappearance.
LaToya Figueroa is coming home from work, and a woman approaches her from behind, throws her to the ground, kicks her in the stomach, drive away.
According to the incident report, LaToya was over 2 months pregnant at the time.
She was rushed to the ER, and thank goodness her and the baby were okay.
At the time, it was thought to be an unrelated robbery attempt but in retrospect, Lee started to wonder if this woman could have possibly been connected somehow to Miss Figueroa's disappearance.
While detectives try to ascertain the identity of LaToya's two assailants, authorities in Philadelphia are beginning to suspect the worst.
LaToya still isn't found, and so at that point, the worst is assumed. She was responsible, she was dependable, not notify her family or friends of her whereabouts, particularly when her child would be left alone without provision.
The police begin to suspect that this is a homicide, and they begin to investigate it as that. The only problem is they don't have a body.
But handing the case over to the homicide unit could be the kickstarter this investigation needs.
If you classify it as a homicide investigation, you get the best investigators, the best detective team, presumably, all working on this case.
For the new team of investigators, that means leaving no stone unturned. However, before detectives wade too deep into the murky the subject matter, Stephen Poche.
The police receive a tip that there's another woman that Stephen Poche was dealing with.
She was like a high school sweetheart of his. Yeah, he was head over heels for her.
But that's not all.
She was pregnant at the same time as Miss Figueroa.
According to Katisha, the other woman's name is Lena Thompson.
They were always friends. It'd be an off and on thing with them. With him and Lena, it was like they just stopped for a few, took this long break. And then it was like, oh, well, I'm talking back to her.
Katisha says that even before Lena or LaToya became pregnant, there was no love lost between the two women.
Lena, you need to leave. I told you about talking to her. I told you this was my man. We've talked about this.
Get out of here.
You get out of here. Get your car and keep going.
Anybody that knew him knew who Lena was. They did not like each other. They had words, and it wasn't good words.
How many times I have to tell you, Stephen? I don't want you dealing with her. I don't want you dealing with her.
Stephen, though, apparently navigated between the two women with the smooth composure of a diplomat.
He did not like that confrontational stuff. He didn't want it to be them bumping heads. So that's pretty much what it was about. Just like, look, let's squash it.
That plan worked. Until Lena and LaToya each came to Stephen with their own surprise announcements. Tales on this shocking new lead.
It wasn't like he was trying to get both girls pregnant at the same time. And I know that sounds crazy because it's like, use a condom. However, he loved both girls. He just didn't want to hurt them.
So here he is trying to juggle these two pregnancies, and everybody's like, wow, this really changes the focus of the case.
Namely, it means police have a potential new suspect in LaToya's disappearance.
The fact he had this other woman pregnant, is she upset that Stephen has two people pregnant at the same time? Could she be a possible doer in this crime?
Not to mention how this revelation paints the man at the center.
You also have another girl pregnant. That's not good. That's going to make any detective suspicious.
But before investigators sit down with Stephen Poche a second time, they first want to talk to the other woman vying for his affections. And what she's about to say would quash any doubts as to who was the victor in this jilted game of hearts.
The situation was a ticking time bomb. It was about to explode, and someone was going to get hurt in the fallout.
As the search for missing 24-year-old mother, LaToya-born child, Stephen Poche, is involved in not one, but two steamy relationships.
He is stuck between a relationship with two women. Two women he has pregnant at the same time.
Stephen responded to them both being pregnant like any guy would. Like, oh, what did I just do?
Naturally, investigators are curious if this development had any bearing on LaToya's disappearance. So they sit down with Stephen's other love interest, Lena Thompson.
Listen, we know that Stephen Poche is the father of your child and LaToya's. That must have made you upset.
No.
What did you do when you found that LaToya was pregnant with his child too?
Stephen didn't even want that baby. He wanted LaToya to have an abortion.
There's this phone conversation that happens between LaToya, the girlfriend, and Stephen, where the girlfriend and Stephen are asking LaToya to get an abortion. And she says no. that is not something that she would be willing to do. And so for Stephen, I could imagine that he was feeling like he was losing control.
Police know that when a situation like this one spirals out of control, bad things can happen. Detectives can't help but wonder if LaToya's street robbery 4 months earlier,
who had some females attack LaToya, made it look like a robbery, and that this was going to be a kind of on-street abortion by beating her in the stomach to the point where she miscarries.
Now, you and Stephen wouldn't have had anything to do with that attack, would you? Seems like a pretty good way to get rid of a baby, huh?
That's crazy. Like, I had nothing to do with that. I swear.
The rumors of the attack were just that, rumors. Nothing the police found directly tied Lena or Stephen directly to the attack. Lena's alibi on the day of LaToya's disappearance checked out, so they had to let her go.
But investigators...
Tell us about Lena's pregnancy.
Because it had nothing to do with this.
Really? Asking LaToya to have an abortion had nothing to do with her or her disappearance?
I didn't ask her to have an abortion. Who said that? She disappears all the time. She does this thing all the time.
That's what she did when she got mad. She shut everybody out, and I don't know if she would, like, leave town or whatever the situation may be, but she was shut down, and she was just, like, not want to be bothered with anybody.
However, those who know LaToya best say that she would never do anything of the kind.
I never thought that LaToya had taken off. Her whole life was her daughter. So to believe that
gestures, the story he's telling, the police officers are suspicious.
And detectives aren't the only ones who have become suspicious about Stephen's story in the month following LaToya's disappearance.
We just feel as though he knows something because he was the last person to see her.
LaToya's family really believed he had something to do with her disappearance. They just couldn't prove it.
Through it all, Stephen continues to proclaim his innocence.
I didn't murder anybody. Why are you not listening to me?
Emotionally, Stephen was a wreck. He was like, yo, why are her family members and stuff blaming me? Not only was he being blamed, but he was being targeted.
But without any physical evidence linking Poche.
Because if you don't have anything on me, I'm ready to go.
They interrogated him for hours on end. He was able to be let go because they had no proof he was showing any foul play in the whole ordeal.
If you don't have the body, you can't have a murder.
That is until an unlikely witness steps forward with a chilling story. A story that may just finally reveal what happened to LaToya Figueroa.
An informant contacts the Philadelphia Police Department and tells him that a man calls him, wants him to get a van, a shovel, and of all things, a body bag.
4 weeks after LaToya Figueroa mysteriously disappeared, the Philadelphia Police Department receives a shocking call that will change the course of this investigation.
The Philadelphia Police Department receives a tip from a concerned citizen that an individual that he knew had contacted him about getting his hands on a body bag.
Why else would somebody want a body bag if they weren't intending to put a body in it?
According to the tipster, William Mason, he believes the body could be that of LaToya.
Obviously, that got the attention of the detectives right away, and so too did the identity of Mason's friend. It was Stephen Poche.
Stephen was interested in hiding or burying a body.
However, investigators are initially suspicious. For starters, William Mason has a criminal record.
Not only did Mason have a record, but police had already searched Poche's home, and there was no evidence to indicate that a crime had taken place there.
Even while they're feeling skeptical about the tip, there's a sense of desperation because at this point, LaToya's been missing for a month. They were running out of any other credible leads.
But there's still one thing missing from William Mason's story: a body. So investigators hatch a plan of their own.
They have the informant contact Stephen Poche.
The van will give you some stuff, and we'll send you down there with him.
The police were going to set a trap. They're going to follow this informant, and they're going to trap them.
On the night of August 19th, 2005, Mason arranges to meet Stephen at a vacant lot in Chester, Pennsylvania, 15 miles southwest of Philadelphia.
Hey man, what took so long?
Chester is like a rural area outside of Philadelphia. If you're going to hide a body or dump a body, you'd be more inclined to do it in Chester County, thinking that no one would ever find it. He's in his vehicle. The friend who's supposed to help him move the body is in that separate vehicle. But little does Stephen know that friend
follow them down to Chester. They see Stephen Poche go into this field on 4th Street, go through a hole in the fence.
Man, this place creeps me out.
What you doing, man? Hand me a soap. Hand me
But as Stephen starts to dig, law enforcement surveillance team notes something troubling.
Stephen had 245s and a bulletproof vest on.
They find that he's armed, and they find that he is apparently ready to do harm to someone, and perhaps even the person who helped him to move that body.
Fearful that William Mason could be the next victim, often
the sirens come on, and you talk about somebody being caught red-handed.
Suspect has fled the scene. All officers be advised. Suspect is armed and dangerous.
Philly police apprehended Stephen at the scene and took him into custody without a shot being fired.
With Stephen Poche now safely in custody, a team of officers searches the surrounding area and soon finds what's left of LaToya's remains.
When they found her body, it was badly decomposed, but then she has these tattoos on her back, and they're able to identify her. And then they find these fetal bones with the body, just heartbreaking.
She had been in a trash bag for 30 pounds when they found her. Very devastating.
The Delaware County coroner examines the body, and they find that the cause of death is asphyxiation.
For friends and family, it's a devastating turn of events. But after over a month of anguish, any answer is better than the agony of the unknown.
Probably one of the hardest things that a police officer has to do is to tell a loved one that they have discovered, found that the person that they've been looking for all this time is in fact dead.
Wondering if it's this way or if it's that way.
But if Stephen Poche hadn't panicked and led police to the body, there's a good chance he may have never been caught.
There was no evidence in his home that there was a struggle or if that she was there. He cleaned up behind himself pretty well.
Nevertheless, Stephen did make the mistake of trying to move LaToya's body. And when he's taken into custody, he makes a shocking confession.
It was all an accident. I didn't mean to kill her.
Stephen is arrested and gives a statement to the detectives that he killed her, that it was an accident in response to
argument over the other girlfriend and the fact that she's pregnant, that LaToya gets agitated and attacks him. And he trying to restrain her.
Poche says she's hitting him, and he grabs her by the neck in order to get her to stop hitting him, that he just held on too long. And that once she stopped him moving after that, he just panicked.
Oh my gosh, baby. Baby, are you okay? Babe, wake up, please.
Regardless of Stephen's story, that evening detectives charge him with LaToya's murder and the death of their unborn child.
Believe in hate per se, but hate would definitely be a close word to explaining how I felt. To dip him in boiling hot water, that would be too easy for him.
But would the city of brotherly love feel the same way after they hear Stephen's story play out in the courtroom? It's a question everyone's about to find out.
We have a situation where Stephen Poche didn't shoot LaToya Figueroa, didn't stab her, choked her to death, but that's manslaughter, not murder. Full death penalty case in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So if it's just a first-degree murder, that doesn't necessarily mean you get the death penalty. But if it's a premeditated murder and any one of those 26 aggravating circumstances, like a pregnant woman, that could come into play. So in regard to the unborn child, we knew that we were facing first degree. We knew that second and third degree were on the table, but we knew that this was really a case of, does he get executed or does he live? That's the reality.
On August 26, 2005, the body of 24-year-old expectant mother LaToya Figueroa is finally laid to rest. That LaToya died at the hands of her unborn child's father, Stephen Poche.
This was a heinous crime. Stephen Poche was charged with killing LaToya and their unborn child.
They literally court him in the process of moving her body. And just the evilness that's with him, anger, could not even express or explain how I felt at that moment.
The community response was, of course, outrage.
Charged with first-degree murder, Stephen faces the death penalty if convicted. His defense team fears the community's animosity could make getting a fair shake next to impossible. So in the final hours before...
We had to work out any deal we could have to avoid him being executed. And that's why at the very last minute, the 11th hour, the Commonwealth agreed that if he requested a judge trial instead of a jury trial, they would take death off the table and he'd be facing life in prison.
As far as prosecutors are concerned, that's as much leniency as Stephen Poche deserves. In opening arguments, they assert LaToya's death was the result of Stephen's selfish and senseless actions.
He had another girl pregnant, was moving in with her. He didn't care about LaToya and his other child. And all he could see is trying to figure out how and his other baby.
He told her, you have to abort this because otherwise it's going to destroy everything I'm trying to do. She refused to do that.
For the prosecution, Stephen had a clear motive. The easiest way out of this predicament was to get rid of LaToya once and for all.
LaToya Figueroa was beginning to be a strain on his other relationship. And so I think when he looked at the possibility of this child coming along, it was a commitment he was not willing to take.
It's the state's contention that following LaToya's prenatal appointment on July 18th, both she and Stephen returned to his apartment where he began his premeditated.
Following the murder, he cleaned up the scene. He wrapped LaToya's body in plastic bags and dumped her in a vacant lot in Chester, Pennsylvania. And he did everything he could to make it look like he had nothing to do with the crime.
And it's about a month later, when the heat really gets turned up on Poche, that prosecutors believe that he had concocted a plan to kill William Mason and frame him for the crime.
It was just a sick and unbelievable story all the way around.
The prosecutor's office was really focused on the fact that Mr. Poche had, of course, the icing on the cake was a confession or the statement from Stephen.
But it's Stephen's very statement to police that's the crux of his defense team's case.
We don't want to hide his confession. We want to show his confession front and center because it proves exactly what we've been saying from day one. This was voluntary manslaughter, sudden and intense passion, and his confession shows that.
First-degree murder carries a much higher penalty than a manslaughter type of killing, where it's really a killing of circumstance.
Clearly, it wasn't premeditated. Clearly, it wasn't intentional. He freaked out, he choked her, and pressed too hard.
It's
flailing, their face is going to probably be changing color. It's hard to accidentally choke somebody to death.
Was LaToya's death an accident or murder? Unlike most trials, the answer to that question is solely up to the presiding judge to decide. On October 17th, 2006, after 7 days of testimony, he hands down his verdict.
The judge found Stephen guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 for LaToya Figueroa and 1 for her unborn child.
At the end of this, satisfaction was felt by the entire Philadelphia community.
The outcome of the case basically gives closure to the family. The family can move on and begin healing.
Stephen Poche is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But for LaToya's devastated friends and family, the sentencing is no substitute for their loss or the grief they still feel because of one man's self-serving actions.
For a person to be so selfish and so senseless, to rob us of her, rob us of her beauty, of her presence. At the end of the day, God is the judge, and he's judging him. He's going to judge him. He's got to answer for what he's done.
This case involving Stephen Poche and LaToya Figueroa, and they went in jail. But LaToya Figueroa, the family, the best thing that they can do is to go to the cemetery. So although it's a tragedy all around, it's by leaps and bounds much more of a tragedy for the family of LaToya Figueroa.